In the summer of 1893, 27 million people came to Chicago for the World's Fair. They came to see electric lights for the first time. They came to see the future. A few blocks away, a doctor named H. Holmes was renting out rooms in his hotel. Most of the guests who checked in never checked out. He built the place himself, trapdoors in the floors, rooms with no windows, a chute that ran straight down to the basement, and in that basement, a furnace, an acid vat, and a dissection table. Newspapers would later call it the Murder Castle. This is the story of the man some call America's first serial killer. Long before he was Holmes, he was Herman Webster Mudgett, born in 1861 in the small town of Gilmanton, New Hampshire, into a strict, wealthy family. He was smart. Too smart, some said. Other kids bullied him for it. And according to Holmes himself, one particular moment as a child changed something in him forever. Classmates once forced him to touch a human skeleton, hoping to terrify him. It didn't terrify him. It fascinated him. He went on to study medicine at the University of Michigan, where he learned anatomy, pharmacology, and, allegedly, how to steal cadavers and stage them as accident victims to collect on fraudulent insurance policies. By the time he moved to Chicago in the mid-1880s, Herman Mudgett was gone. In his place was a new man with a new name and no conscience at all. He called himself Dr. H. Holmes. Holmes took a job at a drugstore in the Inglewood neighborhood. Within a couple of years, through a mix of charm and outright fraud, the store was his. Then he bought the empty lot across the street, and he started to build. Construction dragged on for years because Holmes kept swapping out work crews. Nobody stayed on the job long enough to understand the full layout of the building. Only Holmes knew what he was really building. By the time it was finished, the structure took up an entire city block. Locals started calling it the Castle. On the surface, a pharmacy, shops, and rental apartments. But upstairs, Holmes had built something else entirely. A maze of over 60 rooms, hallways that led nowhere, doors that opened onto brick walls, rooms sealed with iron plating and fitted with gas lines Holmes could control from his own private office. When the World's Fair opened in 1893, Holmes rented out his top floors as a hotel for visitors. Young women, in particular, new to the city, far from home, nobody expecting to hear from them for weeks. It was the perfect trap, built years in advance. Some guests were sealed inside soundproofed rooms and gassed. Others vanished after getting close to Holmes, personally. Julia Connors started as an employee, then became his mistress. She disappeared in 1891, along with her young daughter, Pearl. Holmes told people she'd died during an illegal operation. Her body was never found. His secretary, Emmeline Sigrand, was next. Holmes had even proposed marriage to her. She vanished in 1892. Then came sisters Minnie and Nanny Williams in 1893. Holmes had already swindled Minnie out of her inheritance. Both sisters disappeared. Later, police found Minnie's watch chain and Nanny's belt buckle inside one of the ovens in Holmes's basement. because that basement was the true purpose of the castle. Investigators would later find a dissecting table, vats for dissolving flesh in acid, and an oversized furnace, powerful enough to cremate a human body. Holmes didn't just kill people, he processed them, and reportedly sold some of the skeletons to medical schools. No questions asked. To this day, historians only confirm about 9 murders with hard evidence, though Holmes himself would eventually claim a number far higher. Holmes wasn't caught because of the castle, he was caught because of greed. He teamed up with a longtime associate, Benjamin Pitezel, on an insurance scam. Fake Pitezel's death, collect the payout, split the money. Except Holmes didn't fake it. He murdered Pitezel for real and kept the entire policy for himself. Then, to cover his tracks, he tracked down 3 of Pitezel's own children, Alice, Nellie, and Howard, and murdered them too, one by one, across different cities, while their own mother believed Holmes was helping reunite the family. It was the beginning of the end. A Pinkerton detective named Frank Geyer spent months chasing leads across the country, eventually uncovering the children's remains. 2 of the girls found buried in a Toronto cellar, the boys' remains discovered, burned in an Indianapolis cottage. By 1894, Holmes was under arrest, and once investigators searched the castle in Chicago, the full scale of what he'd built finally came into focus. Holmes went on trial in 1895, officially, only for the murder of Benjamin Pitezel. But behind bars, awaiting his fate, he did something no one expected. He confessed, not to 1 murder, to 27. Some of the victims on his list later turned out to be alive and well. Holmes lied about that too, right to the end, embellishing his own legend even as he faced the gallows. But investigators were able to confirm several of the murders were real, tied directly to evidence found in the castle. He was sentenced to death by hanging. On May 7th, 1896, in Philadelphia, H. Holmes was led to the gallows. He was 34 years old. Witnesses said he stayed eerily calm. Before the noose was placed around his neck, he was asked if he had any final words. What he reportedly said has been quoted ever since. "I was born with the devil in me. I could not help the fact that I was a murderer, no more than the poet can help the inspiration to sing." The drop didn't break his neck cleanly. Reports say his body kept twitching for almost 20 minutes before he was finally declared dead. Even then, Holmes had one last con. He demanded his coffin be buried 10 feet deep and sealed in cement, terrified that someone might dig him up and dissect his body, the same way he'd dissected so many others. Weeks after his death, the murder castle burned down in a fire nobody could ever explain. What was left standing was eventually torn down completely, replaced by a post office that still stands on that same corner in Chicago today. No plaque, no monument, just an ordinary building sitting on top of one of the darkest addresses in American history. If you want more true stories from America's past that sound too dark to be real, but are, subscribe to the 1980 American Story, and I'll see you in the next one.